Get out of my house. You're nothing but a burden now. Cormac hurled Aurelia's suitcase down the marble stairs. It burst open at the bottom, clothes sliding across the floor, prescription bottles scattering, a portable oxygen unit clattering against the stone with a dull, helpless sound. Cordelia stood beside him, arms folded, satisfied. The mansion, glass, stone, and money stacked into walls, belonged to Cormac in his mind. Tonight, he was proving it. If stories like this pull you in, subscribe now and drop where you're watching from, because this one only gets darker. Aurelia didn't argue. She stood on the landing, pale, steady, one hand on the railing as thunder rolled beyond the windows. 10 years in the house and this was how it ended. No courtroom, no warning, just a suitcase, medical equipment on the floor, and a storm waiting outside. You stopped being useful, Cormac said. That's the truth. Cordelia smiled at the word. Aurelia walked down the stairs slowly. Each step landed clean, controlled. She stopped 3 feet from him. You're choosing her, she said. I'm choosing my future. And I'm what? A liability. The word cut clean. Cormac pointed at the door. You signed the prenup. You'll get what you're owed. Nothing more. Aurelia nodded once. She didn't fight him for the keys or the credit cards. She simply placed the SUV key on the console table. I'll walk. Cormac laughed. Don't come back. She didn't answer. The doors slammed. Locks followed. Rain swallowed her whole. The mansion behind her glowed with light and music. Inside, Cordelia poured champagne. Outside, Aurelia knelt, gathered her scattered medicine, lifted the oxygen unit with shaking hands, zipped what remained of her suitcase, and pulled out her phone. One number. She pressed it. Arthur, she said when the line opened. It's time. The call ended. No questions. Headlights slid through the rain moments later. A black sedan rolled to a silent stop. The driver opened the door. Warm light spilled onto the wet stone. Aurelia stepped inside. As the car pulled away, the gates of Blackmore Heights opened automatically, Cormac's system clearing her exit, not knowing it was clearing his beginning. Back at the mansion, Cormac raised a glass with Cordelia. To new beginnings, he said. Miles away, in the quiet of leather seats and sealed glass, Arthur opened a black folder on his lap. Inside it, deeds, trusts, and signatures dated long before Cormac ever walked into Aurelia's life. Aurelia didn't look at the papers yet. She only said one thing. Tomorrow. The word settled between Aurelia and Arthur like a trigger already pulled. The sedan moved through the rain without urgency, tires whispering over wet asphalt. No sirens, no drama, just motion, controlled and quiet. Arthur didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. The moment she made that call, the clock had started. By morning, everything would be in motion. At Blackmore Heights, Cormac didn't feel the shift yet. The storm cleared before dawn. Sunlight flooded the mansion in gold, glass reflecting wealth back at itself. Cordelia stirred beside him, draped in silk and triumph. Cormac rose from the bed with the satisfaction of a man who believed the past had finally been erased. Downstairs, the house felt lighter without Aurelia. No oxygen unit hum. No medication schedule on the counter. No quiet presence gliding through corners of his life. Freedom, Cordelia said as she met him in the kitchen, sliding her arms around his waist. It finally feels like yours. Cormac kissed her. It always was. His phone buzzed on the counter. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. He glanced down, frowning at the screen. Account access restricted. He tapped it once. Twice. Something wrong? Cordelia asked. Probably a glitch. He opened his banking app. The main account, his main artery, refused to load. A spinning circle replaced the balance that usually sat there like a trophy. Another notification hit. Transfer pending, review required. Cormac's jaw tightened. Arthur arrived at the trustee's office precisely at 8. The room smelled of Polish and old money. Men in tailored suits turned as he entered, some nodding, others already aware that today was not a routine meeting. The Sterling Trust is now active, Arthur said calmly, sliding the black folder onto the table. By direct authorization of the primary owner. Pages turned. Eyes narrowed. One trustee adjusted his glasses. The primary owner has been inactive for years. Not inactive, Arthur replied. Protected. He placed a single document at the center. Aurelia Marwick, beneficial owner. Signatures followed. Date sealed it. The air changed. By the time Cormac stepped into his private office downtown, the illusion of control was already cracking. The elevator doors opened late. His assistant stood stiff at her desk. "There's been some interference with the accounts," she said. Cormac dropped his jacket onto the chair. "Define interference." "I can't." He moved past her and logged in from his office terminal. 3 accounts, locked. 2 credit lines, under review. 1 investment portfolio, ownership reassigned pending audit. Cormac stayed at the screen. Ownership reassigned. He grabbed the phone and dialed his bank manager directly. The line rang longer than usual. Finally, a nervous voice. "Mr. Blackwood, we were just about to contact you." "What did you do?" Cormac said slowly. "There's been a claim filed against several properties connected to your portfolio. Until verification is completed, standard access has been temporarily restricted." "What claim?" A pause. "Ownership." Silence stretched. Cormac laughed once. Short and sharp. "That's impossible." "I'm afraid the documentation is extensive." The word landed heavier than it should have. At the mansion, Cordelia was already planning renovations aloud, tearing out things Aurelia had chosen, replacing history with glass and chrome. Her phone buzzed. An alert from her own bank. Card declined, verification required. She tried again. Declined. "Cormac," she called faintly. Across the city, Arthur's phone vibrated once. He looked down at the message, then out the tinted window of the moving sedan where Aurelia sat in quiet light. "Phase 1 is complete," he said. Aurelia nodded. No sound. No pressure. Let it feel accidental. Arthur allowed a brief smile. "As you wish." Back at the mansion, Cormac slammed his laptop shut. "What did you touch?" Cordelia demanded. "I didn't touch anything," he snapped. "Someone's playing games." Cordelia's phone buzzed again. Account frozen. Her face drained. "Cormac," she whispered. "What's happening?" And for the first time since throwing Aurelia into the rain, since sealing the doors behind 10 years of marriage, since raising champagne to victory, Cormac had no answer. Cormac stood in the center of his office, phone still pressed to his ear long after the call had ended. The silence felt abnormal, too heavy, too deliberate. Someone's playing games. That was the only explanation he accepted. He stormed out without another word to his assistant and didn't slow until he reached the underground garage. The elevator doors barely closed before he was dialing again, this time his head of legal. "Tell me this is a delay issue," Cormac said. "Tell me it clears by lunch." The reply came after a pause that lasted 1 second too long. "It isn't a delay." Cormac stopped walking. "There's a challenge to asset ownership in 3 connected portfolios and 1 residential property," the lawyer said carefully. "Filed under a protected trust, old structure, sealed signatures." Cormac felt irritation spike. "Every property I own is clean." "That's the issue," the lawyer replied. "The mansion isn't currently listed as yours in the originating deed." The words didn't land at first. "What do you mean it isn't mine?" "I mean the purchase funds cleared through your accounts," the lawyer said. "But the original land deed is registered to a private beneficiary. That beneficiary has just activated control." Cormac's grip tightened on the phone. "Who?" he said slowly. "Is that beneficiary?" The lawyer exhaled. "Her name is Aurelia Marwick." The world contracted. "That's impossible," Cormac said. "She signed a prenup. She doesn't own anything." "The prenup covers marriage assets," the lawyer replied. "Not legacy trusts. Not protected land transfers. Not private estates sealed before the marriage." Cormac felt his pulse shift, sharp and fast. "You're telling me my wife, my sick, broke wife, owns my house?" "I'm telling you," the lawyer said, "that Blackmore Heights is not listed under your name." The call ended. Cormac stood motionless beside his car as engines echoed through the garage. For the first time since his rise began, the ground under him felt unsettled. Across the city, in a quiet clinic tucked behind steel and glass, Aurelia sat upright while a nurse adjusted her oxygen line. The room was clean, silent, controlled, everything the mansion had not been. Arthur stood near the window. "The challenge triggered exactly as planned," he said. "Legal confirmation will reach him today." Aurelia nodded. "Let him feel it." Back at Blackmore Heights, Cordelia paced the living room with anxious steps. Her phone still showed frozen accounts. Designers she had messaged earlier were now sending polite delays. Restaurants that always held tables had suddenly misplaced her reservation. Cormac entered without looking at her. "What does it mean the house isn't yours?" she demanded. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked straight to the study and pulled open the hidden drawer beneath his desk. Inside lay contracts, certificates, and the framed photocopy of the mansion's deed he'd kept like a trophy. He pulled it free and scanned it. Once. Twice. The bold print sat where his name should have been. Beneficial owner, A.U. Marwick. Cormac felt his chest tighten. "That's still hers," Cordelia said carefully from behind him. "It's outdated," he snapped. "That copy is outdated." But even as he said it, doubt crept through the confidence. Minutes later, the security console chimed in the hallway. Property status updated. Cormac moved fast. The screen glowed. Primary control, Aurelia Marwick. Secondary access, revoked. Operational authority, under trustee review. His access code flashed. Access denied. Once. Twice. A red alert replaced it. Cordelia stared. "Cormac, the doors." The front gate alarms sounded outside, a sharp, unfamiliar tone. Cormac lunged for the control panel. Override manual. System not recognized. Cordelia backed away slowly. What did she do? Cormac didn't answer. Miles away, Arthur placed a single document on Aurelia's table. "Land confirmation," he said. "It's now irreversible." Aurelia exhaled once. "Then begin phase 2. Arthur's phone vibrated almost immediately. He read the message. The house just rejected him. Aurelia closed her eyes. Not out of relief. Out of precision. The house just rejected him. Arthur's voice was calm when he delivered the update. Aurelia didn't respond right away. She watched the city drift past the clinic window, glass towers, moving headlights, a world that never noticed the quiet shifts underneath it. "Good," she said at last. "Now let it echo." At Blackmore Heights, the echo hit fast. Cormac slammed his palm against the security panel again. Another red alert flared. Access denied. The gates at the end of the drive remained sealed, black iron locked in place like the clenched jaw of the property itself. "This is a system fault," he said, more to himself than to Cordelia. She stood several steps back now, the earlier confidence gone from her posture. "You said you owned this place." "I paid for it," Cormac snapped. "That's ownership." Outside, a security vehicle rolled slowly up the drive, not his. The insignia on the door wasn't from his private firm. It belonged to the trustee authority attached to the estate. Cordelia's voice dropped. "Cormac, those aren't your men." The front doors opened from the outside. 3 uniformed officers stepped in, precise, formal, untouched by the tension twisting through the room. "Mr. Blackwood," the lead officer said, "we're here regarding a property control dispute." Cormac forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "There's no dispute. This is my residence." "Not according to the active deed," the officer replied. "Effective this morning, operational control has been reassigned." "To who?" Cordelia demanded. The officer checked his tablet. "Aurelia Marwick." The name sounded louder than it should have. "This is extortion," Cormac said. "I'll sue every one of you." "You're welcome to pursue any legal channel available to you," the officer replied evenly. "For now, secondary access is suspended. You may remain on the premises temporarily under review, but all outbound property authority has been revoked." Cordelia's breath went shallow. "You mean, we're locked in?" "No," the officer corrected. "You're locked out of control." By noon, the news had found him. Not through headlines, through whispers. Calls returned slower. Meetings shifted. An investor luncheon he'd confirmed weeks earlier was unexpectedly postponed. A board member he'd known for years went straight to voicemail. Cormac felt the slide before he saw the fall. At 2:13 in the afternoon, it went public. An industry alert flashed across financial media. Blackwood Holdings faces ownership review on major assets. Trust activated. The wording was clean. Bloodless. The effect was anything but. Cormac watched his stock ticker stagger on the screen, just a stumble at first, then a sharper dip. Traders reacted not to certainty, but to instability. That had always been enough to start a stampede. Cordelia hovered behind him. "What does that mean?" "It means someone made me look uncertain," Cormac said quietly. His phone rang. This time, he didn't ignore it. It was the same bank manager from the morning, no greeting this time, only urgency. "Mr. Blackwood, several linked accounts are now under secondary audit. Until it clears, discretionary spending will be limited." Limited how? He asked. A pause. Strictly essential. He hung up without replying. Cordelia tried her phone again. Another decline. Another alert. Account under review. Her voice shook. Cormac, I can't even book a flight. His jaw tightened. Across the city, in a private legal conference room, Arthur stood at Aurelia's side as trustees finalized the next stage. The screens showed projections, timelines, controlled exposure. They're calling it a routine review, Arthur said. But the doubt is already spreading. Aurelia nodded once. It always does. Blackwood's partners are nervous, Arthur continued. This will isolate him socially before it finishes him financially. Let it, she said. At the mansion, isolation arrived faster than expected. Cordelia's phone buzzed with a message from a designer she'd boasted about for months. Sorry, we're unable to proceed at this time. Another from a so-called friend. Heard something strange about Cormac. Is everything okay? Cordelia looked up at him, panic-naked now. People are talking. Cormac didn't respond. He was already staring at the large display in the study where his portfolio numbers slid downward in steady, silent increments. For the first time, the room felt smaller than him. For the first time, silence didn't feel obedient. At 6 p.m, another alert came through his system. Asset Review Stage 2 initiated. He stared at it. Somewhere in the city, as night slid back across the skyline, Aurelia finished her treatment and stood, steadier than she had stood in years. Arthur held the door for her. The public fall has begun, he said. Aurelia met his eyes. Good. Because Cormac still thought this was a setback. He hadn't realized yet. It was a pattern. Cormac still believed this could be reversed. That was the problem. He stood near the glass wall of the study, city lights trembling far below, phone pressed to his ear for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Another call went unanswered. Another name with power, suddenly unreachable. Behind him, Cordelia watched in silence. Not the confident stillness she once carried. This was different. This was calculation. When does it stop? She asked quietly. Cormac didn't turn. When the review clears. And if it doesn't? He paused. It will. Cordelia stepped closer. Because right now, nothing is clearing. My accounts are frozen. My sponsors stopped replying. People who begged me for photos last week won't even open my messages. Cormac finally faced her. You're overreacting. I'm being realistic. The word realism cut deeper than panic. Downstairs, staff moved differently now, slower, careful, eyes lowered. They had felt the shift too. Power didn't vanish loudly. It evaporated. Cormac's phone buzzed again. Private equity partner, incoming. He answered instantly. Talk to me. The voice on the other end wasn't warm. What's happening with your estate? Paperwork interference. It's being handled. We're suspending all negotiations until your ownership clears. Cormac felt heat climb his spine. You can't do that. We already did. The line went dead. Cordelia's phone buzzed at the same time. She checked it, and this time, she didn't hide the message. Lease terminated effective immediately. Her lips parted. Cormac, my apartment. He exhaled sharply. You're staying here. She didn't look convinced. And then the question landed. Soft. Unavoidable. You're sure she can't take everything, right? Cormac didn't answer immediately. Miles away, the quiet continued to do its work. Arthur walked beside Aurelia through a private corridor lit low and warm. Her breathing was steadier tonight. The oxygen unit remained nearby, but she no longer leaned on it with urgency. The secondary freezes are spreading, Arthur said. Cordelia's auxiliary accounts were linked through discretionary channels. Aurelia nodded. She followed his money. That's how this always works. Arthur studied her. Do you want pressure applied directly to her? No, Aurelia replied. Let fear do it. Back at the mansion, fear announced itself without permission. A black car pulled into the circular drive just after midnight. Not security, not staff. Cordelia looked out the window first. Who is that? Cormac frowned. At this hour? A knock followed, firm, official. Cormac opened the door to find 2 men in tailored coats holding sealed envelopes. Mr. Blackwood, one said. Notice of compliance review. The second turned to Cordelia. And one for you. She took hers with shaking hands. Cormac ripped his open. Temporary travel restriction. Asset movement suspended pending determination. Cordelia's envelope said less. Review participation required. She looked at him, eyes wide. What does mine mean? Cormac didn't answer. Because he knew. By morning, Cordelia's fear stopped orbiting around him and began orbiting around herself. She paced the bedroom, phone glowing in her hands as she scrolled endlessly. No replies. No reassurances. No exits. This wasn't supposed to happen, she said. You told me everything was settled. You told me she had nothing. Cormac sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees. She doesn't have money, he muttered. She has paperwork. Cordelia stopped pacing. Paperwork. The word changed things. Slowly, she sat across from him. Did you ever actually read what she signed? Yes, he snapped. The prenup was airtight. I didn't ask about the prenup. Silence stretched. I asked about everything else. Cormac didn't look up. Cordelia stood. That was the moment she began calculating distance. By sunrise, she had packed 3 bags. Not dramatically. Quietly. Efficiently. Cormac entered the room as she zipped the last one. What are you doing? She didn't stop. Protecting myself. You're leaving. I'm repositioning. He stepped closer. You said you'd stand with me. I said I'd stand with you when you were untouchable. That landed. I still am, he said without conviction. Cordelia lifted her bag. Then you won't mind this. She placed a small black flash drive on the dresser. Backups, she said. Just in case. Cormac stared at it. Backups of what? She met his eyes. Everything. And walked past him. The doors closed behind her without a slam. For the first time, the mansion felt truly empty. Far from Blackmore Heights, Arthur received the update with a single glance at his phone. The mistress has disengaged, he said. Aurelia didn't look surprised. She always would, she replied. Outside the window, the city shifted quietly into morning. For Cormac, the night hadn't ended. After Cordelia left, the mansion didn't echo. It suffocated. Cormac stood alone in the master bedroom long after the doors closed, eyes fixed on the spot where the flash drive still rested on the dresser. Backups. The word gnawed at him. He didn't touch it. He didn't trust what it might confirm. Downstairs, the staff moved like ghosts, efficient, silent, distant. No one asked where Cordelia had gone. No one needed to. By mid-morning, the calls resumed. Not partners this time. Names he hadn't heard in years. Mr. Blackwood, one voice said, clipped and formal. This is the Heritage Registry. We need to verify several legacy filings connected to a land trust under your former spouse. Cormac closed his eyes slowly. Former spouse, he repeated. She's sick. She doesn't manage anything. She doesn't need to, the voice replied. The structure manages itself. Another call. Then another. Legal departments, registrars, audit boards, different agencies using different language to say the same thing. Something old was moving. Cormac drove himself to his law firm before noon. No driver. No security escort. The garage felt larger without them. He parked crooked, didn't care. Inside, his lead attorney waited with a stack of documents spread across the conference table. You should have told me about the premarital land transfer, the lawyer said without preamble. Cormac dropped into the chair. There was no transfer. There was, the lawyer replied, sliding a document forward. 10 years before your marriage. The land that now holds Blackmore Heights was gifted into a protected trust. Cormac scanned the page. Aurelia Marwick, age 21. His throat tightened. She was a student then. She was an heir, the lawyer corrected. The trust was designed to be invisible until activation. Which means whoever advised your wife planned this far in advance. Cormac laughed once, empty. You're telling me she married me already owning the ground under my feet? Yes. And she never said a word. She didn't have to. Cormac leaned back slowly. For the first time, doubt pierced through anger. Not doubt in the situation. Doubt in his memory. At a private residence across the city, Aurelia sat at a long table with Arthur and 2 trustees. Medical equipment stood quietly behind her chair, but her posture was straight, steady. The legacy chain is surfacing, one trustee said. Your grandfather sealed most of it personally. Arthur glanced at Aurelia. You never wanted this. I didn't want what came with it, she corrected. The eyes. The leverage. The waiting. What changed? The trustee asked. Aurelia didn't answer immediately. She thought of rain on marble, of a suitcase breaking open, of oxygen equipment scattered at the foot of the stairs. He forced the timing, she said. By late afternoon, the first historical record hit the press. Not a headline. A footnote. Archived trust linked to Blackmore Heights ownership. Analysts noticed. So did rivals. Cormac felt it in his phone. Old enemies he had outmaneuvered years ago now returned politely curious. One even sent a message with a single line. Didn't realize you married into that. The words burned. At sunset, the electricity cut in one wing of the mansion. Not a blackout, controlled segmentation. Cormac called facilities. Power transfer under trustee authority, the technician said. It's compliant. You can't shut down my house. Sir, the man replied carefully, it isn't registered as yours. Cormac ended the call and stood in the darkened corridor, staring at walls he had once commissioned with his name in every contract. Nothing answered him back. That night, alone in the master bedroom, he finally picked up the flash drive Cordelia left behind. He hesitated, then plugged it into his laptop. Folders opened. Financial records. Private correspondence. Asset mirrors. And beneath them, a folder titled, Marwick Documentation. His chest tightened as he clicked. Inside were scanned copies of trust statements he had never seen. Deeds he had never read. Signatures he had never noticed. All dated long before his rise. All sealed before his first million. And at the center of it all, Aurelia's name. Not as his wife. As the source. Cormac stared at the screen until the room blurred. For the first time since the night he threw her into the storm, since the locks slid behind her, since the champagne touched his lips, Cormac understood something he hadn't allowed himself to consider. He had never been the foundation. He had been standing on one. Miles away, Arthur reviewed the latest reports beside Aurelia as evening settled. The archives are transmitting cleanly, he said. He's seeing pieces now. Aurelia nodded once. Good. He's still fighting the idea. He always will, she replied. Until the last door closes. Arthur studied her. And when it does? Aurelia's voice was calm. Then he finally understands what he destroyed. Outside, the city lights blinked on. Inside Blackmore Heights, Cormac sat in the dark with a past he could no longer outrun. Morning came without ceremony. No staff at the bedroom door. No curated news brief. No quiet luxury routine designed to make power feel permanent. Cormac woke to silence and his own breathing in a room that suddenly felt too large to belong to him. His phone lit up. Not with calls. With alerts. Blackwood Holdings down 18% pre-market. Credit review expanded. Partners withdraw from joint venture talks. He scrolled once. Twice. Every drop felt coordinated. Not chaotic, precise. By the time he reached the office, the lobby no longer paused when he entered. No heads turned. No assistants rushed forward. The elevator took longer, stopped twice on the way up for people who didn't even look at him. Inside his boardroom, only 3 chairs were filled. 9 were empty. His COO didn't meet his eyes. 2 of the directors invoked the exit clause overnight. That requires majority approval, Cormac said. It requires doubt, she replied carefully. And that arrived yesterday. The screen at the end of the table flickered on. Numbers fell in quiet, steady increments. Cormac stood. This is an overreaction. No one argued. That was worse. An hour later, the first formal statement dropped. Blackwood Holdings acknowledges current ownership inquiries regarding select legacy-linked properties. We remain fully cooperative with all legal authorities. Legacy-linked. The phrase followed him through every room like a stain. By noon, reporters gathered at the gates of the corporate tower. Not aggressive, curious. That was more dangerous. Curiosity invited inspection. Cordelia's name surfaced briefly online, then disappeared just as fast. She had moved quickly. At 2:15, Cormac's personal driver texted a single line. Terminated under trustee directive. Apologies. Cormac stared at it, then locked the phone. He walked. On the street, no one recognized him, not as a figure to approach, not as a figure to fear. He moved through crowds as a man without gravity. Inside a quiet cafe, he finally saw it on a muted wall-mounted screen. Archived airship connected to Marwick Trust verified. A still image followed. A younger Aurelia. College-aged. Soft-spoken. Holding a certificate she hadn't even known how to use at the time. Underneath it, primary beneficiary, Aurelia Marwick. Cormac gripped the edge of the table. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was record. Across the city, in a controlled conference room, Aurelia watched the same segment without reaction. Arthur stood beside her, hands folded behind his back. Public confirmation always accelerates decay, he said. Aurelia's eyes didn't move from the screen. Good. They'll restart the asset ladder tomorrow. Secondary properties first. And the mansion? Arthur turned to her. Last. Always last. Symbol matters. Back at Blackmore Heights, the staff had thinned by half. 2 resignations delivered digitally. 1 request for early termination. Cormac wandered through rooms that no longer responded to him. Lights adjusted on delayed settings. Climate controls followed schedules he hadn't authored. Even the security monitors no longer centered on his movements. He was a guest in his own collapse. At dusk, the final call came in. His mother. "I saw the news," she said. No accusation. No comfort. Only distance. "Is it true?" Cormac hesitated. That was answer enough. She exhaled. "You built on ground that wasn't yours." The line went dead. Night fell. Again. This time, it felt heavier. At the mansion gate, a new notice had been affixed beneath the crest. Property under legacy review. Operations restricted by trust authority. Cormac touched the paper with 2 fingers. It didn't tear. Inside the city, at a height where everything looked smaller than consequence, Aurelia removed her oxygen line for a moment and stood by the window. The skyline felt different when it no longer belonged to him. Arthur joined her. His isolated now, financially, socially, structurally. Aurelia nodded. "One more turn," she said. Arthur studied her profile. Calm. Measured. Untouched by triumph. "The final one reshapes everything," he said. Far below, in a mansion that no longer answered to his name, Cormac stood alone in a room full of evidence that the world had moved on without asking his permission. For the first time in his life, no one was waiting for him to recover. Night pressed against the windows of Blackmore Heights like a held breath. Cormac stood in the center of the living room where champagne once flowed and futures had been toasted. The notice at the gate replayed in his mind like a verdict that refused to fade. Property under legacy review. Operations restricted by trust authority. For the first time, the house felt like what it truly was. Not a throne. A waiting room. His phone buzzed. One message. Trustee authority arrival, 8 o'clock. Cormac sank slowly into the nearest chair. Morning came with engines instead of birds. Black sedans rolled through the gates that now opened without his consent. 3 officials stepped out, precise, unreadable. Arthur exited the second car. And from the third, Aurelia. She moved carefully, oxygen unit at her side, but she walked on her own. No hesitation. No retreat. The storm that once chased her from these doors had long since passed. Cormac met them at the threshold. For a moment, no one spoke. "This is my residence," he said at last. Arthur answered calmly. "It is your occupancy, not your ownership." The trustees stepped forward, already scanning the interior with their eyes. Aurelia entered last. She looked smaller than the house. He looked smaller than her. "You planned this," Cormac said. Aurelia's voice was steady. "You forced it." One of the trustees read from a tablet. "By authority of the Marwick Trust, all primary residential assets revert to sole beneficiary control effective immediately." Cormac felt the words like weight added to his chest. "You can't just erase me," he snapped. Aurelia met his eyes. "I didn't erase you. I removed myself." That landed harder than any accusation. Staff began moving through the rooms, cataloging, inventorying, sealing. Every sound echoed with finality. "You're sick," he said suddenly. "You can't manage this alone." "I never was alone," she replied. Arthur stepped beside her. Cormac's voice dropped. "You let me believe I built this." "You let yourself believe that because it benefited you," Aurelia said. The lead trustee turned to Cormac. "You have 1 hour to collect personal belongings. Nothing listed as trust-embedded may be removed. Cordelia's designer furniture, the art installations, the commissioned walls. None of it was his." Upstairs, Cormac moved through the master bedroom like a stranger. The bed where Victory once slept felt foreign. He opened drawers. Empty. Closets. Half empty. Even absence had moved ahead of him. He took a watch. A jacket. Loose papers that no longer mattered. Downstairs, Aurelia waited without pacing. When he returned, suitcase in hand, she looked at it once. "That's it?" she asked. He didn't answer. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, sharper, unfamiliar. Arthur extended a final document. Release of occupancy. Cormac signed without reading. The gates opened. Not for him. For them. The sedans rolled forward. Aurelia paused before the door closed and looked back once more. Not at the mansion. At him. "There was a version of this where we both survived," she said. Cormac said nothing. The door shut. Engines moved. The gates sealed behind them. Cormac remained on the drive with a single suitcase and a silence that no longer waited for instruction. By evening, The statement went public. Marwick Trust reclaims Blackmore Heights in full. Former tenant released without objection. The footage followed. Cormac at the gates. Small. Unescorted. Unannounced. The world reacted the way it always does. It moved on. Across the city, Aurelia stood in a quiet room overlooking lights that no longer intimidated her. Her oxygen unit rested nearby, unused for the first time that day. Arthur entered with the final confirmation. Everything has reverted cleanly, he said. There are no remaining attachments. Aurelia nodded. No victory speech. No satisfaction. Only certainty. What will he do? Arthur asked. Aurelia looked out at the skyline. He'll rebuild, she said. He always does. Arthur waited. But not on my ground again, she finished. The city continued to glow. Power shifted. Names changed. And somewhere beyond the gates of a mansion that no longer answered him, Cormac Blackwood walked into a future stripped of leverage, identity, and refuge. Not ruined. Worse. Owned by consequence.